She rolled out of a carpet at Julius Caesar's feet. She bathed in milk and honey. She was the most beautiful woman in the world. Everything you think you know about Cleopatra is a lie. Ancient Roman historians, her enemies, described her as average-looking, with a large nose and thin lips. So how did this woman seduce the two most powerful men in Rome, rule the richest kingdom on earth, and nearly conquer the Roman Empire? The answer has nothing to do with beauty, and everything to do with genius. This is the true story of Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, and the woman Rome feared most. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC into the Ptolemaic dynasty, descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals, who had ruled Egypt for 300 years. But by the time she was born, her family was a horror show. The Ptolemies kept power through incest, marrying brothers to sisters, uncles to nieces. They murdered siblings who threatened their throne. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, was weak and addicted to pleasure. Egypt was drowning in debt to Rome, and the Roman Republic was circling like vultures, waiting to devour the richest prize in the Mediterranean. But Cleopatra was different from her ancestors. While her siblings indulged in luxury, she studied. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler in 300 years to actually learn Egyptian, speaking to her subjects in their own language. But she didn't stop there. She mastered 9 languages total: Egyptian, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, Persian, and more. She studied mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and rhetoric at the Library of Alexandria. Ancient sources say she could debate with scholars and charm diplomats in any language. This wasn't a woman who would seduce with beauty. This was a woman who would conquer with intellect. When Cleopatra was 18, her father died. According to tradition, she married her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, and they became co-rulers. But Cleopatra had no intention of sharing power with the child, controlled by ambitious advisors. Within 3 years, those advisors staged a coup, exiling Cleopatra to the Syrian desert. She was 21 years old, powerless, with no army and no allies. Most people would have given up. Cleopatra raised an army and prepared to take back her throne by force. And then, Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt. Caesar had come to Egypt chasing his rival Pompey, only to find him already murdered by Cleopatra's brother's advisors, hoping to win Caesar's favor. But Caesar was furious. He'd wanted to pardon Pompey, not see him butchered like an animal. Now Caesar occupied the royal palace, trying to mediate between Cleopatra and her brother. But Cleopatra was locked out of her own city. Alexandria's harbor was controlled by her brother's forces. If she tried to enter openly, she'd be killed. So she made the boldest move of her life. She had herself smuggled into the palace wrapped in a carpet, or possibly a laundry sack, carried by a single loyal servant. When the carpet was unrolled at Caesar's feet, out stepped the rightful queen of Egypt. What happened next changed history. Caesar was 52, a battle-hardened general who'd conquered Gaul and fought civil wars. Cleopatra was 21, exiled and desperate. But what she said in that first meeting wasn't seduction, it was negotiation. She spoke to him in perfect Latin, not as a supplicant but as an equal. She didn't plead. She made him an offer. Egypt was rich. Rome was in debt. Her brother was a child controlled by ambitious men who'd just murdered Pompey. She was educated, capable, and legitimate. Back her, and Egypt would become Rome's most valuable ally. Oppose her, and Egypt would descend into civil war, cutting off Rome's grain supply. Caesar, who'd spent his life outmaneuvering rivals, recognized a kindred spirit. She wasn't seducing him with beauty. She was seducing him with power. Caesar sided with Cleopatra. Her brother's advisors responded by besieging the royal palace with the Egyptian army. For months, Caesar and Cleopatra were trapped with just 4,000 Roman soldiers against an entire city's forces. During this siege, Caesar made his desperate gamble, setting fire to the Egyptian fleet in the harbor. The fire spread, destroying part of the great Library of Alexandria. Ancient knowledge burned while Caesar and Cleopatra fought for their lives. Eventually, Roman reinforcements arrived. Ptolemy XIII drowned fleeing across the Nile, and Cleopatra, at 21 years old, became the undisputed Pharaoh of Egypt, with Rome's most powerful general as her lover and ally. In 47 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy, the 15th Philopator Caesar, but everyone called him Caesarion, Little Caesar. She declared him the son of Julius Caesar, making him heir to both Egypt and potentially Rome. Caesar never officially acknowledged the boy, but he also never denied it. He brought Cleopatra to Rome, installed her in his villa across the Tiber, and showered her with honors. The Romans were scandalized. A foreign queen, living openly as Caesar's mistress, with a child she claimed would inherit the world. It was everything Rome's republic stood against. But Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra became another reason his enemies wanted him dead. On March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March, Julius Caesar was assassinated by 23 senators, 23 knife wounds. When Cleopatra heard the news in Rome, she understood immediately. She had no protector. She was a foreign queen in a hostile city that had just murdered its dictator. If she stayed, she'd be next. Within weeks, she fled back to Egypt with Caesarion. Rome descended into civil war, and Cleopatra waited, watching to see which Roman would emerge victorious, because whoever won Rome's civil war would need Egypt's gold. Back in Egypt, Cleopatra ruled alone, and she ruled brilliantly. She stabilized the economy, managed the Nile floods, kept the peace, and restored Egypt's prestige. She presented herself as the living goddess Isis, speaking Egyptian to her people while maintaining Greek culture for the elite. For 3 years, Egypt prospered under her sole rule, but Cleopatra knew it couldn't last. Rome's civil war would eventually end, and whoever won would come for Egypt. So she prepared, rebuilt her navy, filled the treasury, and waited to see which Roman she would need to seduce next. The man who won was Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and closest friend. Along with Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, Antony hunted down the assassins and divided the Roman world. Antony took the wealthy east, and in 41 BC he summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus. He needed Egypt's money to fund his wars. She knew this was her moment, but Cleopatra didn't come as a supplicant. She came as a goddess. Her ship had purple sails and a golden stern. She reclined under a canopy dressed as Venus, fanned by boys dressed as Cupids, while female attendants dressed as sea nymphs worked the oars. The entire city of Tarsus came to the harbor to watch. It was the greatest entrance in history, and Antony was completely outplayed. Unlike Caesar, who'd been won by intellect, Antony was won by spectacle. Where Caesar wanted a partner, Antony wanted a fantasy, and Cleopatra gave it to him. She hosted banquets of legendary excess. She bet she could spend 10 million sesterces on a single dinner, then dissolved a priceless pearl in vinegar and drank it. She matched him drink for drink, gamble for gamble, hunting expedition for hunting expedition. But don't mistake this for love. This was strategy. Antony controlled half the Roman world. He could give her back Cyprus, Phoenicia, parts of Syria. He could protect Egypt from Rome. And in return, she'd give him money, ships, and legitimacy. They weren't lovers. They were co-CEOs of the Eastern Mediterranean. In 34 BC, Antony and Cleopatra held the Donations of Alexandria, a ceremony that terrified Rome. Antony declared Cleopatra Queen of Kings and Caesarion the rightful heir of Julius Caesar. He gave her children territories across the east, making them rulers of Armenia, Syria, Cyrenaica. He presented himself and Cleopatra as the new Isis and Dionysus, divine rulers of a new Eastern empire. To Rome, this wasn't romance. It was treason. Antony was giving away Roman territories to a foreign queen and her half-Roman children. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and Antony's rival, seized his moment. He declared war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra. September 2nd, 31 BC, the naval battle that would decide the fate of the world. Cleopatra and Antony's fleet of 500 ships faced Octavian's forces at Actium off the coast of Greece. The battle raged for hours, and then, inexplicably, Cleopatra's 60 ships broke formation and fled. Antony, seeing her retreat, abandoned his fleet and followed her. Ancient sources say it was cowardice. Modern historians suggest it was strategy. She was protecting Egypt's treasury ships. But the result was the same, total defeat. Octavian had won, and Cleopatra had 1 year left to live. Octavian pursued them to Egypt. Antony, broken by defeat, attempted suicide, botched it, and died slowly in Cleopatra's arms. She was 39 years old, Egypt was conquered, and Octavian was coming for her. She tried one last negotiation, offering to abdicate in favor of her children. Octavian refused. He wanted her alive to parade through Rome in chains during his triumph. The ultimate humiliation for the woman who'd challenged Rome for 20 years. Cleopatra would not give him that satisfaction. On August 12, 30 BC, she dressed in her royal regalia, lay down on a golden couch, and died. The source? Ancient writers say a venomous snake, an asp symbol of Egyptian royalty. Modern scholars suspect poison. Either way, she died a queen. On her own terms, Rome had conquered Egypt, but Rome never conquered Cleopatra. Rome won. Octavian, soon to be Emperor Augustus, executed Caesarion, erasing the last threat to his power. He paraded a statue of Cleopatra with the asp through his triumph. And Roman historians spent the next 2,000 years destroying her reputation, calling her a seductress, a manipulator, a foreign threat to Rome's purity. But here's what they couldn't erase. For 22 years, Cleopatra held off the most powerful empire in history. She spoke 9 languages. She ruled Egypt during a golden age. She negotiated with generals as an equal. She built alliances that almost created a new world order. She wasn't conquered by Rome. She chose death over surrender. The last pharaoh, the queen who refused to kneel. Subscribe for more stories of powerful figures history tried to erase. Because Cleopatra's greatest seduction wasn't of Caesar or Antony, it was of history itself. And 2,000 years later, we're still talking about her.